Happy Wednesday, everyone. Welcome once again to another fabulous edition of Chamber Chat, presented by Bose McKinney and Evans, LLP. It's race week, and with us today, we have a very exciting guest. Indy 500 legend, Jimmy Kite joins us. Five-time starter of the Indianapolis 500, veteran of 34 IndyCar races throughout his career, now a resident of Brownsburg, and slave to his wife, Mindy, at the print shop. Welcome, Jimmy Kite. Welcome to the Greater Lawrence Chamber Chat.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me today.
Hey, you are quite welcome. So let's start off with a little background information on you. Some young guy born in Georgia, growing up in Effingham, Illinois. How is it that you ever got to run the Indianapolis 500?
Well, actually, it's reverse. I was born in Effingham, so I guess it was put into my system to begin with. And then I grew up down in Georgia, which was, you imagine I got picked on down there, down there in stock car country and late model country, and I'm wanting to race sprint cars and come up to Indy and drive Indy cars. So everybody just kind of looked at me like I was crazy. But, that was back when Raceway Park had that Thursday Night Thunder, and, Jeff Gordon was running a midget on TV, and it was like, that's what I wanted to do. So 2 days after I graduated, packed up all my stuff, moved up here and started running USAC stuff. And it was like 3 years later, I was actually in the starting field at Indy. So it was one of those plans that, it worked out. I mean, looking back now, I can't believe how lucky everything had to play out for it to work the way it did, but I was very fortunate.
So was that your plan initially? You always wanted to run Indy, or were you wanting to do stock cars, or if it had wheels and a steering wheel, you were down for it regardless?
I mean, I wanted to literally do it all. And I mean, I've tried, I mean, there is not much out there I haven't driven. I've driven NASCARs, I did Indy cars, but even, like I said, when I was in my late teens, down in Georgia, I was wanting to come up here and I wanted to run, obviously it was NASCAR is popular. I would love to do NASCAR, I wanted to, but I really wanted to run the Indy 500. I remember one year I would have been 18, maybe 19-ish. And my dad came home and said one of their, vendors offered him some sweet tickets to the Indy 500. Did I want to go that year? And we would always come up here for whether it's a practice day or two, or maybe even a qualifying weekend. Dad, from when I was 3 years old, would bring me to the Speedway, at least for a day or two every single year. But I'd never been to race day. And even that day when I was 18 or 19 years old, and Dad was like, "Do you want to go?" And I told him then, I was like, "No, I'll go when I'm driving." And believe it or not, when I was 22 in 1998, when I was standing there on the grid, getting ready to hop into my first Indy car, that was the first time I ever got to experience race day in person. And it was absolutely awesome. I was more of a fan than a driver for about the first couple hours of the morning.
So let me ask, actually a two-part question. One, I would love to know your reaction when you got the call from somebody saying, "Hey, we want you to run Indy cars," which I've heard this story, but it's a fantastic story. And two, I want to know, what was your race morning routine, and did it differ from your first race to your fifth?
It funny, and this obviously dates me. Like the drivers nowadays will look at me like I'm a lunatic, but I was over in Missouri, because that's actually where my grandparents lived and where my parents were originally from. So I was over there visiting some friends and family one weekend, and I got a page. Remember the little pagers you had to have, no cell phones back then. And I got a page from an Indianapolis number, and I'm like, okay, anything 317, it's got to be racing related. I need to call them back. So I gave it a ring, and it was Luke Wethington, the team manager of Team Scandia, and said, "Hey, Andy, I had met him when we had talked, at some races, and I know they were following how I was doing. But when I saw that number, I was like, oh man, I got to answer this." So Luke called me up and said, "Hey, Andy wants to talk to you. What's a good number for a landline for him to call you on?" And Andy, right as soon as I hung up, Andy called me right back and said, we're racing in Colorado next weekend. We'd like for you to come test our Indy car out there. How fast can you get here to Indianapolis? So if you want to go to the airport in St. Louis, hop on a flight and come across, I'll fly you across. I'm doing the math in my head, and I'm like, you know what, I can drive there just as fast as you can fly me. So as soon as we hang up, I will be there shortly. And I literally hung up the phone, foot to the floor from when I left south of St. Louis until the Putnamville exit. And I remember the exit because that was the sign that I had to stare at the whole time the police was behind me running my tags from pulling me over. And it was like, he had to think I was nuts because he comes walking up. And by the time he came up, I was already holding my license out the window and still smiling. I mean, happy and beat because I just got a phone call. I'm going to drive an Indy car next week. So I'm holding my light. I'm afraid this is going to wreck my chance, you know, if we don't hurry. So he comes up and I'm smiling and happy, even though I'm sure he's about to write me a ticket. And he had probably thought I was crazy, but he goes back. And he comes back up and I tell him what's going on. You know, I'm like, man, I'm sorry. I'm in a hurry to get to Indy. I'm going to be driving an Indy car next week and I don't want to be late for my seat fitting. And so when he come back up the last time, he just, fortunately, thank God for him, he just was like, here's a warning, you know, slow down from here to Indianapolis. And by the way, good luck next weekend. So that was about a couple minutes later, I was there at the shop and getting my first seat made. So that was my first IndyCar day that I will, you know, every time I drive by the Putnamville exit to this day, I think of that moment and that day and how excited I was and just not knowing what was ahead of me from there on. That was a lot of fun. And as for my race day routine, it's pretty much the same. I mean, I tried to do everything right the first year. And, you know, we got the police escort in and did all that and got there. And it dawned on me, I didn't sleep the night before. And it was like, I didn't even need this, you know? So the next year, I knew I didn't really sleep that much. I got to bed early. And when I woke up, went out to the track and we got there before the crowd was even there anyway. And then just kind of went over in a corner and laid there and tried to, you know, get a couple Z's and just think about, you know, the next 200 laps.
So race morning, and I can only imagine there's 300,000 people there. You're on the front straightaway. It's 2 hours before the race or an hour before the race, probably when you come out. How much of that were you a fan just taking it all in? How much were you overwhelmed? And how much were you focused on actually going out and running the race car?
That is the one moment that I feel sorry for the drivers that never got to run 2 Indy 500s. You know, I mean, and I know we're all very, very fortunate that any of us even got to run one, but I was so overwhelmed being there on pit road. And like you said, you know, just looking, I mean, I was in all the fans because when we tested, even, you know, qualifying days and stuff, you know, it's just not like race day. When you turn that corner and you're looking out Gasoline Alley and it's just that what was normally silver stands, anytime I walked out there was full of people and just colors and like a haze, you know, and it just, as I walked out on pit road and I looked down towards turn 1 and I looked down towards turn 4 and that's all it was just a haze. And I just remember sitting there for the national anthem and all the pre-race stuff. I mean, getting to hear back home again in Indiana in person there on the grid, but looking up at the stands, I was just overwhelmed. And even when we got in our car, started our engines and we started to pull away and I hit the short chute and now these, you know, the short chute stands are full and the hill's full. And then I hit the back straightaway and the hill on the back straightaway is full. And like, I'm looking at people on the left that I'd never seen. That was all just, you know, green grass. And then now turn 3's full. And it just, I mean, the whole time the veterans are scrubbing their tires and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I'm literally a fan just sightseeing going, oh my gosh, look at all these people. And that's where I'm very fortunate that I got to come back and do it again the next year and the next year. And it's, you know, the second year, my PR guy that was with me, it was his first year. And I was like, man, wait till you see this, wait till you see this. And to see it in his face and experience, you know, see Tom's looking around, looking at the stands and to see it on his face, what I was doing the year before. And every year after that, when I got to see people on my team that was their first 500 to watch them experience, that was a lot of fun.
So now you were never with one of the marquee teams. In fact, every year that you ran a 500, you were different with a different team. How pampered were you? Did you have somebody whose job it was to carry your helmet? Or you obviously had a PR guy. I'm curious how much of that is scripted and scheduled for you and you're taken care of as a driver, and how much they say, hey, Jimmy, you got a spare hand? Can you carry this?
You know, the first year I was there with Team Scandia, that was the old Dick Simon Racing team. And, you know, they had everything. I mean, it's one of them deals where I wish I could have drove for that team at the end, you know, made all my rookie mistakes somewhere else and then went back and drove for a team like that. They had everything, you know, it was like almost like, what do you mean I don't have to do anything to my own helmet? I mean, I've always put my own, you know, my own tear-offs on or carried my own helmet. I mean, this is so weird, but after that, like I said, you know, I went to the second team, you know, McCormick Motorsports. It was a very, very small team. But, you know, they had to have press releases and stuff go out. So we had a PR guy, and it was somebody I had worked with before on the year before with some ARCA races I had done. So, you know, he was from down in Georgia too. So we bonded real fast. And, you know, his job was to write the press releases and do everything for the team. But me and him bonded. And he was kind of like, well, I can't write a press release while we're walking out on pit road real quick. So make me look like I'm doing something. Give me your helmet, you know, and it just became a joke because for the rest of the year he did that. And it was, you know, just to look busy. But then the next year I went to Blueprint Racing, and he came, you know, he just happened to, you know, come over there too. The same team manager brought him over there. And then it was a point where it didn't matter what I was doing, even if it was one of the years I just drove the Indy 500 and nothing else. And Tom ended up going over and doing, you know, sports car stuff and working for some teams over there. But if I drove the Indy 500, Tom stopped doing what he was doing, and he was there with me regardless. And he actually was one of the guys standing with me in my wedding too, you know, a couple years ago. So we have, you know, it was a friendship we, you know, started a long time ago, and it's still going strong.
So now looking at your career, I did bone up, even though I did this a couple years ago. So for everybody here, we did a Jimmy Kite appreciation night at the Antelope Club, 2-3 years ago. And so we reviewed his career then and brought in a couple of his old team owners. You had 34 series starts, every one of them in an oval. Are you like blind in your right eye and can't turn right, or did nobody trust you to do that?
Well, it's I mean I'm a dirt guy, so I'm actually, when I first came up here to Indy, that's all I did was turn right, you know, to go left, you know, the old cartoon saying. But you know, when I first started running Indy cars in 1997, there was no road courses on the schedule, you know, and there wasn't even an Indy Light series back then. So it's not as if I could go from a sprint car or a Silver Crown car and then, you know, learn downforce cars, you know, in an Indy Lights car, and then go to an Indy, you know, or Indy Lights and then go to an Indy car. I mean, they were plucking us right out of Silver Crown cars and sticking us in a full-fledged Indy car. I mean, you know, Tony Stewart did it, you know, myself, Donnie Beats, our friend Tice Carlson, you know, we were all doing that at all about the same amount. And it was a huge learning curve, you know, doing that. But then after all the years, you know, I had done it, all those years, it was just ovals. And even when they started going to the road courses, I mean, I can drive a road course, but it was just because the last couple of years I wasn't racing road courses. It was like the teams were like, oh, no, we're fine. We're going to get a road course guy in here. I'm like, well, hold on. Aren't you even going to try? No, we're going to get this guy in. All right, whatever. So do what you got to do.
Interesting. Now, your last attempt, 2007, you were in a Panos. Tell me about that car. Was that just an evil ride, or just its time was long past?
No, I mean, the year before in 2006, Ganassi was still using Panos cars. I mean, that same body style and car had gone 224 the year before. It wasn't really a problem or, you know, anything, but it was just when we were in it, the year we got it, that was the first year that the teams had gone to one engine manufacturer. There was no more Chevy and there was no more Toyota. There was just one engine manufacturer. And I won't get into all the politics of it and everything, but it was just funny that the word of thumb is when you pull a degree of rear wing out, you know, if the car still handles great in the corners and you're not scrubbing off speed in the corners, then you're going to go a mile an hour faster down a straightaway. Each time you do that, you're going to go a mile an hour faster. We pulled 6 degrees of wing out of the car and gained 1 mile an hour. Now, we never slowed down in the corners. We never did anything else, but it was convenient that every time we took a degree of wing out, somebody was plugging into the database from the engine and stuff. And it was, nobody will ever admit this, and I don't know, you know, whatever, but my understanding when all was said and done was I wasn't going to bump out somebody that was a full-time driver, but if there was one certain driver that was on the bubble, they were going to give me the power to let me bump them out. And I wish I would have known that, you know, the week before, the day before, so I wouldn't have been out there risking my life thinking it was me and I'm doing something wrong.
So now on the risking your life, you say you came from open wheel cars and you went to downforce cars. How much trust did you have to have, and how much of your fear did you have to set aside the first time you go into turn one at speed and you have to convince yourself it's going to stick. It's going to stick.
Well, it's funny actually, coming from like my first IndyCar race was out in Pikes Peak, Colorado, and I just 2 weeks earlier had ran a midget and a Silver Crown car there. And those cars, you know, you're sliding around. I mean, they have no downforce, and I mean, you feel like you're on ice. So when I first got an IndyCar there full of wings, I mean, I felt like this thing was a dream. Like, oh my God, this thing is awesome. This is what I wish, you know, my Silver Crown car felt like. Fast forward a couple months, you know, half a year later when we're at Indy, I was actually just telling my wife this the other day, was I cannot tell you how many times I was going down the front straightaway at Indy after we had made some tweaks or changes, like maybe the car just didn't quite feel right, and we came in to make a change, or it might have just been a pole morning attempt where I hadn't ran flat yet. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go flat this time. But when you're going down that front straightaway, and I will tell you, when you're nervous about turn one, that front stretch, even as long as it is now, it feels twice as long. You know, you have all that time to think about it. But there is many, many times that I remember thinking to myself, you know, I've made my peace with God. We're set. We're done. And if I don't make it through the exit of turn one, or make it into turn two, then you know, I've had a good life. And you know, you kind of hold your breath going into one, and then you exhale on the short chute and like, live to fight another day. All right, we're good.
You're watching Chamber Chat, presented by Bose McKinney and Evans, attorneys at law. Thank you, Bose McKinney and Evans, for sponsoring Chamber Chat. I don't even know if I said this at the beginning. I'm Brad Kloffenstein. I'm president of the Greater Lawrence Chamber of Commerce. That's secondary to what all we have going on, because we have our star, Jimmy Kite, is here. I'm going to ask you one last question before I turn it over to questions from our audience. Do you still go to the 500? How many have you been to, and what is your race day routine now?
You know, we haven't the last couple of years, and it's so crowded out there, and you know, a kind of a younger group for me, you know, being around. I've never, and I guess not being the tallest guy, I don't like being around big groups of people anyway. But we'll go out there on Veterans Day, you know, and I might go out for a practice or qualifying day, you know, to tell everybody hi, which we didn't this year, but I always go out there on Veterans Day, you know, for that autograph session we do. I mean, I love seeing the guys I used to drive against, or even guys that I wanted to be when I was younger, or even, you know, some of the younger guys now coming up. So Veteran Days, you know, is an important day to me. I always love being out there for that. But fortunately, with that SVRA series, you know, the vintage series that had ran out there the last 5-6 years, you know, whatever it was, that kind of became my Indy 500, because we could go out there, you know, there wasn't a ton of people around, but I got to see all of my friends, you know, that I used to run, whether it was over on the stock car side or whether it was Indy cars, and my era, the era before me, the era after me. So it was kind of like, let's just wait and go see everybody next month. But, you know, we'll definitely watch it or listen to it, or whatever it is, you know, whatever they have us doing this year, you know, live, we always either watch it or listen to it live regardless.
So let me open it up to our assembled guests. Any questions for Jimmy Kite while he's with us today? Just raise your hand, wave. Russ Dodge, go right ahead.
I'll unmute myself here. Jimmy, I did a lot of work with Jonathan Bird Racing over the years, and Jonathan always partnered with a lot of people. And I was looking over your background, and I see McCormick there, and I see Ron Hemmelgarn and a few others. Were any of the rides you ever had a co-entry with Jonathan Bird, with any of those guys?
They were not. We, believe it or not, in 2000, you know, 99, it was McCormick. And then in 2000, Jonathan Bird had teamed with McCormick. And for the first race of the season down at Disney, I didn't have a ride. So I was down there talking to multiple teams. And I had actually talked to Dennis and, you know, the Bird family about driving with them. And we were out in Phoenix, and I was talking to two teams at Phoenix. It was either going to be, you know, Bird McCormick or Blueprint Racing. And it came down to, because those guys were running the 99 chassis, but they were both about to get their new 2000 chassis. And I had ran the G-Force chassis the year before, and Blueprint said they're getting a new G-Force. So for the next race, you know, we would have a G-Force. Bird and McCormick said they were getting that Riley and Scott. And I just kind of watching how that thing was at Disney, it horrified me being a test guinea pig. That's kind of the way I felt I was my rookie year with Team Scandia, with some stuff we had going on over there. And I didn't want to go through that again. So I went ahead and chose Blueprint that year.
Got it. Okay.
So other questions for Jimmy Kite while he's here?
I'll
Yeah.
ask a question real quick. I have
Go
two.
right ahead.
I think you may have already answered the first one, but I just was wondering, I think it would be so hard to not drive fast if I had your skill set. And so I think you already answered it by saying you had a ticket on your way to get fitted. So I think you've already answered that.
My wife always says either I drive. She said it's either two ways. Either I'm a race car driver or I'm grandma. She goes, there's like an off and on switch, and she goes, there's no in between. I'm either a lunatic race car driver or I'm grandma. So.
Well, I drive a Mustang and I always have a little fun, but honestly, I can't imagine doing what you're doing. So I would find myself probably, in the same situation.
It happens.
But one of the things that over the years of being in the General Assembly is something that I think that is really important to the state of Indiana, but the industry of the racing industry as a whole. And certainly I've watched it here in our state, but indirectly in my community and in Brownsburg, the Hendricks County area, Speedway, Marion County, and then north of us. I'm just curious what your thoughts are. I know that we have, a great leader with Roger Penske, and I've been able to see firsthand some of the good things and hands-on work that he's doing. But I just wondered what your thoughts are about racing. I mean, outside of what we've all experienced with COVID, but how do you see the future of racing here, maybe specifically in Indiana, but the industry as a whole?
It's funny because we all, I've had this talk a lot, and it's going to be like, I love racing, and I love what it does for the communities. Like I lived in Speedway for a while, and everybody sees what that's done. Main Street, how that's been built up and nice, and it's so fun when whether it's a race at IRP or the Speedway, or even, a race down in Salem, Indiana, the extra people it brings to town for that day or that weekend or that month, like the month of May was always, there was people that I would only see once a year, and it just, you didn't see them again for 11 months. And then all of a sudden, hey, it's May. How's your last year been? Did you get married? What'd you do? How was Christmas? And you would see them once a year, and it was like your once a year family. And I mean, but that helped expand, out into the communities and stuff. Those fans that live out in the community, we would all get together, and, you see those people, whether you're out at dinner or stuff. I mean, people that I had never met in person, or that I knew I met, we might just be out at a restaurant in Speedway, together, and happen to be sitting next to each other. And next thing you know, we're having a conversation, and we're friends, and, we're now friends on Facebook, and every time we see each other out, we might buy each other a beer or talk or whatever. It adds friendships, and it just adds to the, the whole area of it. The one thing, the future of racing that just has me interested in seeing, because I know it's the way, the world's going in the industry, is electric cars. And I know that's the way all the vehicles are going that we're going to be driving on the highway, but I just, inside of myself, I almost hope it's past my time that I have to see 33 electric cars going to turn 1 at Indy.
That's really cool. Well, I'm excited to just continue to watch and see how it develops. But I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad you continue to reside here and clearly, a business leader in our community as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. Let me ask, how many of your contemporaries do you keep up with? And, did you guys hang out a lot when you weren't at the racetrack, or even when you were? And do you keep up with them?
Some. I mean, it's like I said, that SVRA thing was really cool, because I mean, there were some drivers that, fortunately we have Facebook now, so a lot of us, like, I can be online, and even though I didn't talk to him much, I see Buddy Lazier, Kara posting stuff, or Jacques Lazier or some of them, and I'll, we might talk on there and stuff. But the SVRA thing was fun, because we were all actually, we had a weekend to just kind of catch up. And man, how's the kid doing? My God, I remember the weekend, your son was born, and he's how old now? I mean, I can't believe it's been that long, just, there's some, we still talk to and hang out though. Tice Carlson, I'll talk to him any chance I get. And then I think it was 2 weeks ago, I was, out at Donnie Beechler's house for his 60th, birthday party. And there's some, that we still catch up with. But like I said, a lot of us, kind of like I talked about, it just, unless it's one of the guys that I really kind of ran USAC stuff with, that, we ran the midgets and the sprint cars and all that with. It's more than just kind of like the once a year family thing that, we still meet and catch up on.
So, one other question I have for you, and this might be a little bit of a deeper question. What has Indy 500 meant to you and being able to run it 5 times? How has that affected your life?
It's it's who I am today. It was, when I was 18 and 19, I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't really know who I wanted to be. You're still a kid, you're still trying to figure out, even what clothes you want to wear, and after, getting to do it, I fortunately was out there. I was at an Indy car for 10 years. There was a couple years, 3 years that I was in a car and we didn't even make it. And then, 2 years I missed. 10 years, I got to drive against, I was telling people, at the first part of my career, I was racing against Ari Lyondike and Eddie Cheever and Allenzer Jr. and Scott Goodyear. And at the end of my career, I was racing against Castro Neves and Dixon and, all these guys coming in. And it's just so funny that the era that I got to run in, the guys that were leaving and then the guys coming in, fortunately I was around for that 10 years. And it really it built who I was, getting to be the young guy with all the veterans teaching me what to do, what not to do. And then at the end of it, getting to kind of talk to the younger guys and tell them what to do and what not to do. And it really did, build me into the human being I am today. And I've just, obviously didn't have the stats and the wins and the stuff I wanted, but personally, I'm very thankful for who it turned me into today.
So did you ever have a conversation with one of the bigger teams, a Penske or a Ganassi, and them say, hey, Jimmy, you want to do a test? Or I'm curious, how much were you selling yourself and how much were other people inquiring whether you were available?
I was selling myself. The problem is, like in 07, when I basically was done with it, that's when the economy tanked. And unless you had a rich uncle or a rich somebody that was going to come in and help, all these teams, when the economy tanked in 07, all these teams had all this equipment, all these cars, all this stuff, but no money to run it, no sponsor money. So, I understand why they did that, but I had literally had teams calling me, hey, Jimmy, we'd love for you to drive. And I'm excited. Oh man, that's awesome. this team just called me. And their next question is, can you bring any sponsor money? And I was like, oh shoot, no, I can't. And then I would never hear back from them. So, it was those 10 years, it was very fortunate that I didn't have teams asking me that. They actually called me and wanted me to drive their car, and it was because they felt like I was the guy they wanted in their car, and there was nobody else they would like to have in their car. And it was a very fortunate time, and I'm very lucky that was the era I got to drive in.
Yeah, well, and the next year, 08 was blendification.
Mm-hmm.
What I call it. So you had a whole lot of guys who had driven the year before who were like, yeah, I got nowhere to go.
Yeah, and they had nowhere to go, no money, and it really. I'm so fortunate everything got back together, but it was just the timing was just horrible for some of the guys in the series.
Oh, absolutely. So now, obviously, this is the Greater Lawrence Chamber of Commerce. Do you ever make it out to Lawrence?
We have been. We'll go out there every once in a while. Actually, believe it or not, we've done some install stuff for some customers. Mindy's back in the day. Her and her dad had the company forever. That was Brownsburg Signs, and then 5 years ago he passed away in an auto accident, so we had to shut that down. And then Mindy and I started up this new one, Mindy's Brownsburg Signs. But fortunately, yeah, they've had some customers for years, and I do. As soon as I saw Lawrence, I was like, hey, isn't that where? Yep, that's where that was. So yeah, we've been out there before, and I've helped contribute to some food bills, and had a good time out there.
Well, just know, anytime you make your way to Lawrence, there's always a cold beer waiting for you out here.
Awesome.
So, Jimmy Kite, thank you very much for joining us. You all have been watching Chamber Chat, presented by Bose, McKinney, and Evans, attorney at law. If you guys ever get in trouble with Johnny Law, call Bose, McKinney, and Evans. So anyhow, thank you to everybody who tuned in this week. Jimmy, enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. Thank you for taking half an hour, 45 minutes out of your day to join us. And thank you all for being here. Things to keep in mind coming up on the calendar here in Lawrence. June 10th, we're having our diversity in the workplace luncheon. That's going to be at Murphy's Craft House. So get your reservations in for that. June 28th, we are having our golf outing at Hillcrest Country Club. We're taking foursomes for that. July 13th, we have the Lieutenant Governor, Suzanne Crouch, coming in to speak to us for our Women in Leadership luncheon. And I believe we have a Breakfast Connections luncheon with the Arts for Lawrence on July 29th. So make your reservations for that. Thank you again, Jimmy. Thank you for everybody who's watching, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
All right.